Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Power of Perception Pro Wrestling Radio Network, and we continue our interview series. For those of you who are new around here, we will just give you a brief overview before we get to tonight's interview. If you are new, then you wouldn't know that we tend to, or try to, cover independent wrestling and independent wrestling companies from a introspective standpoint. We give an outlet to independent wrestlers, independent promoters, and other individuals involved in the industry to try to just basically pick the brains of individuals who are involved in the industry and give you a behind-the-scenes sneak peek about the wonder that is independent wrestling. And we certainly try to do that in the best possible way. And we've done that for over 70 shows now. And in doing so, we try our very best to connect with individuals who are at various stages in their careers. We've done over 70 shows thus far. If you're interested in following what we do, you can certainly do so on social media. There's two platforms you can use for that. You can go to Scott Golden on LinkedIn, or you can go to at PO Perception on Twitter. Between the two networks, 70,000 of you are following what we do. We really do appreciate that, and it is awesome to hear and see the reaction that we have for covering the underdiscovered acts in professional wrestling from all different areas of the country, internationally, as well as just covering some companies of note. And tonight we will have ECW original Jim Molineaux, one of the original referees and officials for that company, who now is involved with OTW Old Time Wrestling. We're going to talk to him about the wonder that is being a promoter, his several-decade-long career and foray into independent wrestling, and the interesting and often crazy world that is indie wrestling, all the way back to Joel Goodhart's Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, through ECW and now OTW and all points in between. In any event, I believe Jim is with us now. Jim, are you with us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for taking time out of what I'm sure is a super busy schedule. Being a promoter is a thankless job and often requires about 168 hours in a day, let alone a week, to complete.
Well, that's all right. I took a break from my tendonitis forming, cutting flyers for an upcoming event. So
there you go.
That's one of the things independent promoters do.
Among others, making sure venues are ready, making sure wrestlers are happy, and making sure there are fans to be entertained by the wonder that is independent wrestling. So I'm sure most people listening to this program are familiar with your work, but for anybody living under a rock, give us kind of a Reader's Digest version for the folks who may not be as familiar as they should be with your history in the business.
Well, other than my stay with the original ECW, I was there for the long haul from day one till the last day. I was there for the restart, if you want to call it, of ECW by the WWE. Hung out there for a cup of coffee and said, "That's enough, thank you very much," and left. But before that was with Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and back in the day of quote-unquote tape trading, Tri-State Wrestling got got busy with people trading their tapes. Mainly, everyone, if you know the story or the history of Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, he had a tremendous series of matches with Tri-State Wrestling Alliance against Eddie Gilbert. In one night, they had 3 matches. It was a pins count anywhere in the building match, a stretcher match, and a cage match. They also had a classic barbed wire match, and I think all of these you can find on YouTube if you look for them. But that was where I got my start with Tri-State. Hung on to once Tri-State closed down. Basically was the beginning, the embers of the fire that became ECW. Stuck around through ECW, like I said. When they shut down, got some local independence going on. Started working at a local wrestling school, running shows that were under the banner of OTW at the time. Eventually, we split off, and OTW became its own entity, and been running it ever since. Now we're going on, let's see, 17 years now.
That's a long time for an independent promotion, and you know, there are so many promotions that are here for a few years and then they disappear. To what do you contribute the longevity of OTW?
Well, we kind of evolved. The first, I'll say 5 or 6 years, we only did maybe 3 or 4 shows a year. And we came up with the idea, well, if we have a wrestling school, why don't we find a building that we can set up and run our own shows in without having to take the ring down or rent a ring or anything like that, and just do everything all in our building. And we've done that now. We started with one building, and we moved since, and the second building that we're in now serves the same purpose. And that seems to have worked out for us. I don't know how many other promotions do that or not, but with the ability to be in your own building and not having to, do all the stuff you have to worry about with using other facilities like renting chairs for that building, extra insurance you may need, printing tickets, all that kind of stuff that every promoter goes through. We don't do that. We have our own chairs. We just use carnival tickets because we're just right there. And the ring is permanently set up for training, for kids' birthday parties, and for shows. So we're able to run shows. Our schedule runs we do Saturday afternoon shows at 2 o'clock from the week after Labor Day to the week before Memorial Day. And then every month we'll run a nighttime show, and we'll do the nighttime shows over the summer also. So, being a promotion that can legitimately say we run at least 40 shows in a year, that kind of helps us out too. I think that kind of draws a little attention to us.
And I think that core group of having a bunch of guys and ladies who have a home base where they can come to and wrestle on a weekly basis, or build in terms of knowing what it is to be in the same building. It's a different style than, say, an independent journeyman who has to go all over the country to try and find themselves. It's a different way of coming up, almost akin to the territory days of old, no?
Yeah, absolutely. It allows us to develop storylines, develop wrestlers' characters, and I think it's a lot different than any other, general independent, because they only run, most of them will run twice a month, maybe 3 times a month on the weekends, which is great for if you can do that. And a lot of those do that only 2 or 3 times a month because they have a larger budget. Well, they'll bring people in on a consistent basis. We really don't do that. We work on our guys and people that they run into on other independent promotions that are quality wrestlers coming in and being able to tell their stories without having to spend the money for a big name. Now, we have brought people in before, but we don't necessarily find that needs to be done all the time. We're getting to the point where maybe we'll do it a little more often, just to try something different. But I think, having a good storyline on 3 or 4 matches on your event helps immensely. That tends to bring the people back, and that also running that many shows, and if we can get people to keep coming back because they're following the storyline, that keeps our ticket costs down too. So we only charge $12 for adults and $5 for kids. And we do lots of specials too, where we'll do like a family 4-pack for $30, or we'll give a month-long discount to the local colleges, or we'll do a food drive where if you bring food, we'll give you money off. So we're not in it to make a ton of money. I mean, yes, we need to make money to pay the rent and pay the bills and all that kind of stuff, but we're really looking to get these guys seen by the fans and other people out in the independent world so that they can get booked too.
So, curious question. You mentioned being able to kind of network with quality wrestlers and give them kind of a home base or home promotion and then bring in outsiders. From the early 90s to now, has the definition of a quality independent wrestler changed? If so, how so? And if not, what has stayed the same throughout your career in that definition of quality independent wrestler?
Well, it hasn't changed for me because I refuse to really give into a lot of what people call quality independence now. You still have to be able to know how to lock up, and you have to be able to tell your story in the ring. But as looking at it as running a school, you have these guys who come in, and the first day they want to do Hurricanranas and 615s. But they can't lock up. The same with the hardcore situation, where I remember one time a guy came in and said, "I want to learn to be a hardcore wrestler." And at the school I was at the time, the guy said, "Well, here's a shopping list. Go to Home Depot and come back." And he went and bought all the stupid stuff he put on this list at Home Depot, and actually apologized because he didn't have enough for a hammer saw or for a nail hammer. But, and the guy said, "Okay, now throw all that away and I'll show you how to lock up." Because you need to learn those basic things first. And when I look at someone who is the basic independent wrestler that I'm looking for, the quality independent wrestler I'm looking for, he has to be able to tell the story in the ring. He has to be able to make his stuff look as real as possible. I heard it from Terry Funk. I've heard it from other people say the Pandora's box is open now. Everyone knows it's quote-unquote fake. So now I have to make the people believe in me. So that's what I'm looking for in a quality independent wrestler. I have to be able to believe that person is real, that person in the ring, that persona in the ring is real, and that they want to really have a fight.
I believe it was Terry Funk, and I'm paraphrasing, and you can correct me, but wasn't there a comment he made one time? People may know that wrestling is not real, but that doesn't mean I can't make them wonder if I am, or something to that effect. No?
Yeah. It was basically that now everybody knows wrestling is fake. Well, I have to make them believe that I'm real. Because at the time, so many wrestlers or so many characters in wrestling were unbelievably fake. And, a guy like Terry Funk is very believable, trust me. So that's what I'm looking for in an independent wrestler. They can have a character, that's fine. I have no problem with it. Their character has to be believable, and their character has to be believable in the ring.
And having been around for, we're looking at 30 plus years for you, right? So,
not quite. But I'm not that old. It's over 25, but it's not 30 yet.
Not 30, okay. But in a quarter century, what's the worst injury you've seen, either been in the ring for or been on an event for?
Ooh. There was one time, and I can just remember this, watching it on the monitor and hearing it in the back. There was a guy who climbed to the top rope of the ECW arena and was going to jump off, and you heard the snap of his leg, and it broke, almost like the Sid one that everybody's seen online, or when Sid did it on live television. That's the kind of break this guy had. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but it was pretty ugly. That's the kind of thing I remember.
All right, and So, I mean, there's so much in the ECW being the predecessor to what we see in a lot of modern independents today in terms of building, localized areas and kind of building one venue and then branching out into another. What do you think ECW and Tri-State before it has taught or should teach promoters of today? What's the things that need to be done right, and what's the biggest mistakes you see independent promoters in 2017 making?
I would say don't grow too fast. Everybody wants to be, or also they also want to be the next ECW. There's never going to be another ECW, so don't try to do it. But I think growing too fast, not everybody needs to be on internet pay-per-view or the Fight TV app or pay-per-view or whatever it is. I mean, with us, I looked into it, and the cost I didn't think was worth it, so I nixed it. But we do make our own DVDs. We'll record our night shows and put them out as DVD releases. But yeah, I think most promoters grow too fast and they expand too fast, and then they run out of money too fast. That's one thing I mean, I'm probably the exact opposite. I've gone too slow. We don't run outside of our building. We were going to do one this year, and it fell through. Only in the independent world would something like that happen. But I'm not going to get into it. But I'm willing to do shows outside of the building. I'm looking into it this year. But there's only a certain radius I'm going to go because I know we don't have our own truck. So I have to rent a truck, and I know how much it costs for mileage. So once I get past a certain mile, then I'm going to start losing money. I'm not going to do it. So you really have to plot things out where I think people jump into things too quick. They see dollar signs being thrown at them, and they end up losing money.
So you mentioned OTW having your own venue, your own school and building, but many promotions aren't that lucky. What's the strangest place that you've ever had the pleasure or displeasure of officiating or attending an event?
Wow. Some of the theater setups that ECW ran I thought were kind of goofy. Wow, there was one, I can't remember what town it was, but they didn't even set up a bathroom for us. The area that they had for us was almost like an alleyway, and I think they had a spot potty, and I remember Taz getting there and flipping out on the guy who was promoting the show, and they ended up moving us to, there was like a closed bar area, almost like a balcony that had been closed off and wasn't seated anymore. It was now a bar area, and we ended up using that as the locker room. But yeah, some weird configurations like that. Like, I was never a fan of doing theaters where the ring is up on the stage, because the fans in the first couple of rows of the theater can't see, because theaters dip down to an orchestra pit. So now they're, instead of being level with the stage, they're 3 feet below the stage. Then you're looking at another 4 feet on top of that to try to see the ring. Things like venues like that, I thought were not great setups.
Every independent promotion has to carve out their niche. So for folks that aren't familiar with the OTW brand, what will they see if they order a DVD, if they seek you guys out online? What are they going to witness?
First of all, OTW stands for Old Time Wrestling, and it doesn't mean that we're a bunch of old timers or that what you're seeing is your grandmother's wrestling. It does tend to be more story-oriented as opposed to spot-oriented, which I think a lot of independent wrestling is. Our guys tend to tell stories in the ring. There's a year-long struggle for the heavyweight title sometimes between 2 guys or 3 guys. So I think that's kind of what you'll see. I mean, I'd rather, for me, it's comparing the Rock and Roll Express against the Midnight Express, as opposed to wrestling that you would see today. And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with the wrestling you see today, but I love the story that those guys try to tell in that match. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's what you'll see with OTW.
Is it a misnomer in independents today that crowds can't be conditioned to appreciate stories at an independent level, or is it just something such as you have to have a steady venue and you have to build a fan base?
I think it depends on the product that the promotion is bringing. I think the only kind of match that you have on your show is one where everybody's doing triple Lindy's or some kind of crazy stunt like that, as opposed to having a mixture of everything on your show. The same with the hardcore shows. Not every match can be a hardcore match. You know, if you look at ECW, as much as people try to emulate ECW and think that every match is a flaming table match, it wasn't that way in ECW. You would have your flaming table, but that wasn't in every match. That was one match. Then you would have Dean Malenko against Eddie Guerrero, or you would have Tajiri against Guido, or Super Crazy against Mikey Whipwreck. And you had various types of matches. You would have a comedy match on the show. So, I just think that promoters and promotions that just say, okay, here's X product, and every match is like that, I think that kind of hurts them.
From a personal standpoint, when was the first time you knew you were doing something and living your dream? Certain match, certain night. What was that for you?
Wow. There might be a couple of different ones. I think for everyone, it's the first match they have in front of a crowd. So I would kind of maybe throw that away. Not I hate to say to throw it away, because that's not fair to the guys that were in the match. But everyone will say their first match. I think with being a referee, the importance of the match and the fact that maybe people don't remember who you are or what matches you did is important to me, because that was my job. My job isn't to be, a superstar. My job is to be the referee, and the match is not about the referee unless the storyline calls for it. So for me, it always goes back to the first triple threat match that ECW had between Shane Douglas and Terry Funk and Sabu. Because I go back again to tape trading days where that became an international tape trading sensation. Everybody wanted that match. And with that really put us at ECW on the map. And I think, if anything, I look at that. I also look at matches where when you come back through the curtain, you go, wow, we really had the fans really bit into that match and loved it. I think of matches with Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible for things like that. And I also think of the first time I ever worked with big names. The first name match I did was Cactus Jack against David Sammartino. So for me, it's different stages and different reasons, but they're the kind of things that really stick out for me.
What's the one lesson that you think indie wrestlers, and then we'll split that off, and indie promoters need to learn to make the independent world better in 2017 and beyond?
Wow. That's a really good question. As far as the promoters go, I would say it's not about you. It's about the guys in the ring. It's about the show. It's not about you getting in the ring. Prime example, when Paul took over ECW, he wasn't in the ring all that much. When he became the controlling person of ECW, when he wasn't managing Sabu anymore, he stepped behind the scenes, and he would only come out in front of the crowd for important things. So as far as a promoter goes, that's what I think is important. As far as the independent wrestler, I would say you really need to listen to the fans a little bit more instead of the constant, I have to get this in, I have to do this, I have to do this, or this has to be in my match. It doesn't have to be all the time. If you have a spectacular finisher, you don't need to do it every time. You need to do it when it's important. And again, that's tough to do on the independents because you go from promotion to promotion. Every week you could work for two different guys in the same night. You probably need to get that in, that super kick or whatever it is. So that's hard to do, but I think variation of your matches is what's important for an independent wrestler today.
At what point do you think that we started to see matches start to look extremely similar on the same card? I remember in the 80s, you used to see no two matches would look the same. And now it appears, if you watch a lot of independent products, you see German suplexes or strike wars in about 5 out of 7 matches on a card. Where did that begin to erode, in your opinion?
Here's where it comes from. It comes from wrestlers going over their matches in the back for the entire night until their match and not paying attention to what's going on because they're not seeing that the third match finished with, I'll just say, a pile driver, and your match has a pile driver in it. Well, that may, or I'm sorry, let's say the third match has a pile driver in it, and pile driver is a bad example, but they use a pile driver and it's not the finish. Your finish is the pile driver. How come you're not watching that match saying, hey, you can't, or before that say, hey, don't do a pile driver because that's my finish. So I think that's where part of the problem comes, is that independent wrestlers are so focused on their own stuff. Like I said, they have to get their stuff in, are so focused on their match that they don't see what the rest of the card is and what's going on, and being able to make adjustments with their match so that it's not the same match for everybody to see. And that's also on the promoter, too.
Do you have a story or two of just things that could only happen in the independent wrestling world? A ring breaks, a tile falls out of a ceiling in the middle of a match, just things that, like, okay, time to regroup, did not expect this.
We've had a ring break twice at OTW, and it wasn't expected, and we tried to work through it, and we couldn't. I was afraid, one, it would damage the ring more, somebody would get hurt. And because of our situation, the way it is, that I was able to just give people, the fans, tickets to come back at another time, not necessarily the next week, but at another time, come back. That's the advantage that we have with that. But also, the one that sticks out the most, I was doing an independent show up in New York, and it was one of those, I don't know why they do these 16, 20-match marathon shows where by the time I got home, it was time to go home and go right to my 9-to-5 job. The first 7 matches, the first 5 matches, 4 of them had ref bumps. And again, that goes back to not paying attention to what's going on with the match before you. Now, 3 of the ref bumps were done by Billy Caputo, and if you know who he is, he's an older referee who's with WWE. He worked for Vince Sr., and probably at the time he was 65, and he's taking 3 bumps in the first 5 matches. And I went to the promoter and I said, "This is ridiculous. We keep coming back as referees for the next match and the next match after that, after bumping. We look stronger than the wrestlers do. You need to curb that." So that's the only independent wrestling story.
I was just going to ask. I mean, in theory, if a ref goes down once in an event, that should be it. We don't see him again until the next night, right?
It depends on the severity of the bump. Rob Van Dam, I broke my nose on TV, and I was ready to go back into the ring and keep doing matches. I just said, just put a bandage on my nose and it'll look okay. We'll just, go along from there. But I was legitimately knocked out and didn't realize it. So that's why they stopped me from getting back in, because I was down for a lot longer than I thought when I saw the TV a couple weeks later. So that made sense. But, yeah, I mean, it's the reality of what a fight should be. And if that were to happen, yes, the referee should be done for the night.
All right. And so you mentioned the injury of a broken nose. What's the worst injury you've personally had?
I would probably say when I did a partial ACL tear. If you go back and look at Heatwave 2000 from Los Angeles, in the main event, the Stairway to Hell match between Dreamer and Just Incredible, I tore my ACL. You don't see it, but what actually happened was I was climbing over the railing to follow the guys into the crowd, and the cameraman came up from behind me and hit me. Didn't see me. He was trying to get a shot. Hit me in the back of the head with his camera, and I went knee first onto the concrete. And if you watch the rest of the match, you'll see me dragging my leg.
That was the same night that there was a rival company trying to cause trouble, was it not? Was that the same
yes, that was
occasion?
The night. Yes.
What memories do
In fact,
you
that
have
was,
of
that was
that?
the match.
I was going to say, it sounded like that was the match. What memories do you have of that interfering with the match and just that whole incident? And how common is that in independent wrestling, rival companies coming in and trying to create trouble?
That's the only time I really ever saw it happen. I do see more independent companies, especially in the New Jersey area, because there's so many here. I see them helping each other more than trying to shut each other down. I don't know necessarily how I feel. I mean, I'd love to be the only company running, but I'm not going out of my way to shut somebody down either. But as back to that incident itself, we saw them before the show even started. They were gathering on the corner. In fact, my dad even saw them and said, "Hey, are those guys from another company?" And they came in and sat in their seats, and they had their tickets, and security went and talked to them, and they said, "No, we're not here for any problem. We're here for support." And they did behave. They behaved themselves until the very last match, and they got into it with Francine, and that's when it started. And we had to stay with the match because we were live on TV. So security escorted them out, and while they were being escorted out the side door, ECW locker room emptied out the back door and met them when they were shoved out the door by security.
Historically speaking, the ECW relaunch that World Wrestling Entertainment did years later, could it have worked, or was it a product that was not handled in a way that would have allowed it to be different enough to have worked?
Yeah, the way it was handled, it would not have worked. What it became obviously didn't work. And I think that if they had let Paul run with it a little bit more than they did, yes, maybe put a few restrictions on them, because times were changing. Even in the outside world of wrestling, things were changing. Things were becoming more politically correct. So a lot of stuff ECW did was getting to the point where it couldn't be done anymore. So that kind of had a factor too. But just the way it was run and the way I say we as the originals were approached and the way things changed, it wasn't going to be the same. And I don't think you could recreate ECW without having the ECW originals. I think if there was a flow into new talent with us being around, that would have worked. But we were just wiped out, and wrestler XYZ were brought in.
So suppose we're going to give you a time machine now. Time machine is used for you to step into the ring as the third man in, or in a tag match, the fifth man in, for any historic match or any 2 or 4 competitors that you've never got the chance to ref before. In other words, you can go back to a historically important match. What do you ref and why? Anything, all time.
Ooh, I have to go with any of the. Ooh, I hate to do this. Can I? Because I'm going to leave somebody out, leave a tag team out that I love and my favorite tag team of all time. But I would have to go back to, I mentioned this match before, Midnight Express against the Rock and Roll Express, just to be part of that storyline, whatever territory it was in. Those guys, incredible matches, incredible stories. But if I could throw another tag team in, I'd throw in the Fantastics. I love the Fantastics. I thought the matches with the Midnight Express against the Fantastics were better matches, but there was a better payoff with the Rock and Roll Express if you're talking the business of wrestling. But I enjoyed the Fantastics with the Midnight Express much more.
See, and for some reason, and maybe it's because I always saw you as a no-nonsense official, I felt like you were going to go back to maybe like a Johnny Valentine, that just knock down, drag out, make me wonder style. Seems to.
No, I'll tell you why. As coming into it as a referee, when you look, in particular, a tag team match, but if you go back and watch any of those matches with the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, or Fantastics, they know how to work with the referee, use him as a tool to tell their story without making the referee look ridiculous. And that's what I love about that. All 5 or all 6, if you include Jim Cornette, everyone involved in that match does not come out looking stupid.
What's the biggest mistake referees make that invalidate themselves without even realizing it?
Not enough confidence in themselves to be an assertive referee, but also they can also be too assertive to the point where they become part of the match when they're not supposed to. Maybe that's it. We're being part of the match when they're not supposed to. I mean, I can name matches that I did that nobody knows I did, which are historical matches in ECW, and that means I did my job, as opposed to an independent show where you may not remember the wrestler's name, but the referee stood out because he was a goof or he did something dumb or something like that. I think toning themselves down and kind of not being a part of the match so that they stand out is the most important thing for a referee.
All right. We've had multiple boom periods in the sport. There's the golden age when we started television in the 50s. Then we go to the 80s with the rock and wrestling era. Then we go to the attitude era of the late 90s. What do you think it's going to take for the next boom period in professional wrestling?
I don't know if it's going to come. I really don't. I think I mentioned before, Pandora's box has been opened. Everybody knows it's not real. Television ratings are horrible. I don't know if by the time their contract is up, TNA will be on, or I should say Impact will be on television. Maybe what could save wrestling is making it more realistic, almost like what New Japan has done, where it's about the match and about the wrestlers in the match. Maybe making it closer to more like an MMA type of thing, as opposed to being overly a character. Even Conor McGregor is a great character, but Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor, as opposed to whoever you want to pick is not the name that they're given in the WWE.
And I very much agree with you that, to me, the next evolution in pro wrestling is a mixed martial arts hybrid with old school promos and hype to get people wondering, hey, are they really going to injure each other out there? To me, that's the next evolution. What's the art of a good promo, and what's the best promo you've ever seen?
The art of a good promo is, well, I don't know if it works anymore. The promo has to be to get the fan into the building. And I don't know if what today's product, with the way today's product is set up, that necessarily doesn't happen with the promos. If you look at guys like Jerry Lawler got people into the Memphis Coliseum every Monday night. And his job, he had two pieces to his job. Talking them into the Coliseum on Monday night, on Saturday morning television, and two, when he had them there Monday night, getting them to come back next week. And the way wrestling is set up now, that doesn't happen anymore. Best promo ever? Dusty Rhodes. Pick one. Hard Times. You got to say Hard Times.
There you go. And I'm thinking the Terry Funk motor oil promo from Memphis in 80, 81, something like that. And for those who haven't seen it, yes, he doused himself in motor oil for the benefit of a pro wrestling promo.
And it got people into the building. Yeah,
it certainly did.
Memphis got people into Memphis Saturday morning television got people into the building.
And I think at some level, in some areas of the country, maybe not everywhere, but I would have a feeling that an episodic television show still could in some smaller to medium-sized towns. Now, it's not going to work in New York City, but some small southern town or small towns outside of a major metropolitan area, I still think it could be done somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I think the art to do a promo is dependent on the situation. And I think that, yeah, you could find a place where you could run a little territory. My parents live in the middle of nowhere in Florida, and it takes an hour and a half to get there from civilization. And on the way, I always go, well, there's a place to run a show. There's a, and you could set up. I don't know what their TV market is. I think it might be out of Tampa, but I wouldn't necessarily run Tampa. But I'd use this Route 27 to run 2 shows every weekend with, probably 8 or 12 different venues.
All right, let's get people up to speed on old-time wrestling. Let's get them up to speed on what they're going to see at the next big monthly event, and who are the major stars right now in the area, and what do they have to offer for people who are interested?
Well, the next show coming up is July the 15th, if that's I don't have a calendar right in front of me, and I apologize to everyone at OTW. I'm not that prepared. But I believe Saturday is July the 15th. It's our next event, 7 p.m. at the OTW Arena in Williamstown, New Jersey. Go to our website, oldtimewrestling.net, and that will give you all the information you need for any upcoming events and things that we have going on. In fact, I will look at a calendar because my wife has one here in her office.
I just grabbed one on the 15th. I just grabbed one. The 15th is indeed a
Yep.
Saturday.
15th, and then we'll do another one in August, and then in September we'll start up our weekly events, our weekly 2 p.m. events, the weekend after Labor Day, and we'll run until the week before Memorial Day. But once a month, instead of a 2 o'clock show, we'll do a 7 o'clock show. And the 7 o'clock shows, we bump things up a little bit. We might bring somebody in. You might finish a storyline on a night show. You might start one. I hate to say that, if you consider our 2 p.m. shows our weekly show, our weekly television show, the 7 p.m.s would be our monthly pay-per-views, but it's that on a minor scale. As far as what you'll see this month coming up, I know our newly crowned heavyweight champion, Eddie Hawkins, will be defending his title. I don't believe it's up on the website yet as to who he is fighting. I don't have the book. Some of the guys do that have been with me for a long time. So I let them do it because it's a learning. We're still a school, so it's a way for them to still learn. But you'll also see Brian Johnson, number one Brian Johnson, who has been seen on. If you look at Future of Honor, he was just on it this past weekend for Ring of Honor. So he's done some stuff with Ring of Honor. Mick Drake, who has done some stuff with WWE. Adam Chandler, the Great, who's done some with WWE. Justin Pusser, who I believe you guys had on a couple of months ago. He'll be there. He was our former champion, so he might be coming after Eddie for that title. And also we have a couple of girls who go at it like you will not believe it. Our one girl, Damaris, she comes from a family of boxers. Boy, if it came to picking someone to stand behind in a fight, I'm standing behind a 5-foot-tall Damaris because she's got one hell of a punch.
There's an art form to that, too. Treating women as equals in a sport that for a long time didn't. And I love the women's wrestling revolution that we've seen with promotions like Shine and Shimmer and Queens of Combat. What does it take for a woman to stand alongside the men as an equal in 2017?
I think they need to follow the evolution of what women's wrestling has become and not be the old school, I don't know what you would call it, from the older days. I don't mean the Mae Young days, but I mean there was that Divas era that I think everyone kind of needs to forget, where they didn't do much wrestling, and we've had the girls go at it for a long time. The couple of girls that we do have, Damaris and Jasmine, and I've never asked them, and I would never ask them to do something like a panties match or or a pudding match or a Jello match or something stupid like that. Girls, I want you to get in there and I want you to go at it, and they do. We have other girls who come in and work with us too, and they've gone at it too. One of them we've had Kelly Klein come in from Ring of Honor, who was undefeated with Ring of Honor. She came in and tore it up. So that's all I ask for them to do, and that's what I think any of them should do. Go out and have their match, be honest to who they are, their character, just the same as the guys. Go out and be honest to your character, be honest to the people, and you'll get the respect that you deserve from the fans.
What's the biggest life lesson that time in pro wrestling has taught you that applies to other areas of life as well?
Have a backup plan. Not that I had a backup plan beforehand or anything. I'm not college educated. I'm high school educated. I own my own business outside of wrestling, but that took a while to build. When ECW shut down, I had to go back to working warehouse jobs. Come into the business of wrestling with something to fall back on. If in the ECW situation the company goes bankrupt, or in your own situation that if something, God forbid, happens that you can never wrestle again, you need to fall back on something. You need to have some sort of education. And I'm not saying college, because not everybody's cut out for college. Me, I should have gone to a trade school. I should have been a plumber or an electrician or something like that. And those guys make a lot of money. I think some of them probably make more than independent wrestlers do. So always have something to fall back on. Be prepared in case something does go wrong, because wrestling is a dream. And, you know, unless you really want to make money in the business, you have to work for the WWE. And there's probably only, 185, 200 jobs with the WWE, and how many thousands of wrestlers are out there trying to get those jobs. So you need to be prepared for something else.
Give us a story from the road that's PG-13. We can be a little bit risque here. That can only happen in wrestling. Maybe car broke down. Maybe you hit a moose on the highway. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen on the highways and byways?
Okay, I'll give you this one, because I just saw Shane Douglas a couple weekends ago and confronted him about this. We were driving from, I'm guessing, Buffalo to Pittsburgh. I'm just throwing those out because it was a common run for us. So we're going from Buffalo to Pittsburgh, and I know it's that corner of the country. And Shane Douglas and the person he was driving with were maybe 20 minutes ahead of us. And I get a phone call, and he says, "Be careful, at mile marker 25, there's a deer in the middle lane of a 3-lane highway." All right, thanks a lot, I appreciate it. We'll go up the hill, and at the top of the hill is mile marker 25. Get to the top of the hill, and there's a deer in the middle of the road. But it's not laying there like it's dead. It's a dead deer, definitely a dead deer, but it looked like somebody sat it up and posed it for a picture. Almost like, the naked baby on the bear rug picture. And,
oh, wow.
So I confronted him, Shane Douglas, this is, 15 years later, a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I know you guys got out of the car and positioned that deer. And he goes, absolutely not. He said, that's the greatest story I ever heard, and I would admit to it. So I don't know what happened, but this deer was sitting up, just looking at us, coming up on him.
That is by far probably the strangest story I've ever heard.
Yeah, I can't give you too many risque stories, because I didn't lead a risque life in ECW, believe it or not. As much as everyone thinks everyone in ECW was absolutely bat nuts, that's crazy.
Well, I'm thinking, I've heard a couple of guys who didn't. Lance Storm is another one who, from all intents and purposes, what people have heard, was a little bit on the PG side or the G-rated side. So not everyone has to be crazy if they're in that environment.
Oh yeah, trust me, I avoided situations every night.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes or so remaining, and I think we've covered a good bit. If anything, what didn't we cover that would be a major undersight if we didn't?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think I think everybody kind of got where I stand about wrestling, not only today, but from a referee's point of view, and what's important in being a referee. And I think being a referee today is the same as being a referee 20 years ago. I don't think that portion of wrestling has changed. You still need to be aware of your ring presence. You need to be aware of the crowd. You need to be aware of time. There's so much involved with being a referee, so much more than what most people think of. So I think, I hope people can watch wrestling with an appreciation for referees, especially if you go back and watch some older stuff where, they didn't have the earpieces. The times were given to them through hand signals and things like that. So if you go back and watch some of the older stuff, some of the old NWA stuff, like I mentioned, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, watch guys like Tommy Young. I think you'll get a deeper appreciation for referees and what they've done throughout the wrestling history.
All right. Final question. Delete one thing from wrestling history. If it's a trend of hardcore, if it's a certain storyline, something. Delete one thing from the history of the sport to make the sport better. What goes away?
Vince McMahon saying that wrestling is fake. I think the wrestling that we knew, or that maybe we grew up on, would either one still be around or two lasted a little bit longer than it did.
In a social media age, could people still believe?
Sure. And using social media to, if a wrestler or promoter is smart, they could be using social media to their advantage. If you look at things like back in the day when the Four Horsemen attacked Dusty Rhodes and broke his arm, that could show up on YouTube now with somebody doing it. So, yeah, social media could definitely be used to your advantage.
All right, and I thank you so much for this interview. It's probably one of my favorites just because we covered so much and it flowed really easy. I think that's one of the things that matters. So give people the website for Old Time Wrestling once again, any social media plugs you want to get out there. Now's the time to do all that good stuff. Sure.
It's oldtimewrestling.net. All one word, Old Time Wrestling. No E in the old, just oldtimewrestling.net. There you also get our Facebook and our Twitter information, and you can follow us along there with updates. And Twitter is a good place for us where we give away discounts. So if you're in the area, if you're coming into the area for something else, our 2 o'clock shows are a great companion show. Come and see us at 2 o'clock and then go to the arena for whatever's over there, or go to the skate zone where CZW runs. We're only a few miles away from each other. So look at us and see what we're doing, and stop by, and I think you'll enjoy what we do. As far as me, you can follow me on Twitter, and it's at Jim Molineaux. It's hard to spell, but I'll spell it out for you. It's JIMMOLINEAUX. It's at Jim Molineaux, and that's on Twitter. And I give my opinions, and some of them are strong, and some people maybe don't like them, but that's too bad. It's my opinion.
The one thing that it's great to have an opinion as long as it either provides support or a reason for disagreement. The one thing you don't want an opinion to do is provide apathy, because then you don't have one at all. In any event, that's a good.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet.
That's a good.
Give me time. I'm probably sure I will.
All right, and with that, we get the 90-second warning. That means we'll be out of here in a minute and a half. Once again, Jim, thank you so much. And for those who are new around here, we've had everybody from Anthony Henry of Evolve fame to Bruce Pritchard of, Brother Love fame, and all points in between. We continue to bring you the best in underdiscovered or already discovered and needing a little bit more spotlight talent here on the Power of Perception Pro Wrestling channel. We encourage you to give us a follow on Twitter at PO Perception. Remind you once again, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.